relying on other people and their actions to affect your own happiness too. And feeling that need of, like, we all need support. We need people, we need love. But putting all that pressure on one specific person is really unhealthy.
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Hey, Danielle here. Parenting is the hardest job in the world. Pandemics make it even harder. We are under immense pressure right now to be there for our kids as they weather these uncertain times. How important is it to you to extend your patience and learn new strategies that help your kids feel understood and safe in your home right now? I have a gift for you. Go to parentingwholeheartedly.com/emotions to download a free 5-page workbook teaching you exactly what to do to walk your child experiencing a tantrum or a meltdown back to calm. It includes a printable to put up on your wall to use with them. If you're not on my email list yet, friend, you need to be. I want to equip you to be the parent you want to be during this time. So go to parentingwholeheartedly.com/emotions to download yours today. Now, let's start the show. Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Leslie MacNabb. Leslie is the owner of Rise with Recovery. She's a self-care coach, certified yoga instructor, and recovery advocate. Through her own support from the recovery community, she decided to dedicate her work to the other spouses of recovery by empowering them to practice self-care. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you so much, Danielle. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I have a feeling this episode could be like 2 hours long because we have
Yes.
so much that I want to talk to you about, and I'm so excited to hear more about your story. But you have 2 kids, right?
I do, 11 and 13.
11 and 13. So you're a parenting pro.
Right. I know how to do everything now.
Yeah, mastered it, all the things. So take us back to early motherhood and just let us know what were those days like for you?
Yes. So I always knew that I wanted to be a mother. That was just something that I always wanted to do. So I was very excited about that. In hindsight, I look back now and that I was really checking off boxes: get the good job, get the house, do this, have kids this many years apart, and really just trying to fit into something that I thought was the right way to do things. And I had my first child. Things went really well. I now realize she was a pretty easy baby because when number 2 came along, it was completely different. I thought, I'm going to be a pro at this now. I already have one. I know exactly what to do. And he really just turned all that upside down for me. And realize now that I went through some postpartum depression, which was undiagnosed, but he was not a good sleeper. So the first year I was up every 2 hours. And, a couple years into his life, so I was staying home with my children, working part-time. But I kind of, one day, and I can't tell you specifically what happened, but I realized that I didn't recognize myself anymore because I had given them all my energy, all my attention, didn't leave anything for myself, didn't leave anything for my husband at the time. And so that was definitely a huge struggle for early parenting.
Do you feel like you put added pressure on yourself?
Yes, especially since I felt like I can't be struggling when this is exactly what I wanted. And this is exactly what I was asking for. And, I always wanted to be a parent. How can I be having such a hard time?
Yeah.
So I did not do any self-care. I started into therapy when my son was a couple years old, just trying to reconnect with myself and figure out what I wanted out of life. And at the same time, I was struggling in my marriage, which ended up after, doing what I could. And we both worked really hard for a few years, realized that this was not benefiting anybody. And so did end up in divorce, which I had a lot of guilt about. You talk about, how you feel like you're failing. And that was definitely something I can look back and feel like a major moment. So a lot of guilt with that. But at the same time, I realized that with this time to myself, when they were with their father, I had to reconnect with myself big time. Started dating myself and figuring out what I needed for my self-care. I found yoga, which I had been practicing for 20 years, more for a fitness, the fitness aspect, but I found it in a different way this time and went through a teacher training program. And that was really helpful to me to focus on my self-care. And I learned that by putting myself first, giving myself self-care, that then I could be a better mom, then I could be a better partner. And that made all the difference for me at that time. And then fast forward, I got into another relationship, which was amazing. This caring, sweet, creative man whom I love. He complimented me, and I realized I don't know. I felt good around him. I liked myself around him. I liked the person that I was around him. And he told me early on about his past struggles with addiction. And at the time he was sober and we were having this great relationship. Well, he was sober, but he wasn't fully in recovery. So what that means is, he wasn't attending meetings. He wasn't taking any medications for his mental health. He wasn't attending therapy, anything like that. And that willpower definitely ran out when he faced some struggles of his own and ended up relapsing, which I did not know because it was guised as anxiety and depression, which was also there. That was definitely a layer, but he was in withdrawal every time I saw him because he wasn't using around me. And that went on for a year. So it was really, really tough relationship. And I thought it was helping him, but because he couldn't figure out how to do just simple daily things that he needed to do. And so I was trying to help find him resources for everything. And then he ended up getting arrested. And I wasn't sure if we were going to move forward. I have these kids that are my world, and is this something that I want to have in their life. And so that day when he was released, I told him that a boundary for myself was that he needed to be active in recovery in order for us to continue our relationship. That if he didn't give up, then I wasn't going to give up. And he entered himself into treatment. And then again, I found myself alone because he was in treatment for 4 months. And this time I used all the knowledge of the yoga that I had learned. It was self-care time that really got me through all of that. And I noticed my own habits of codependency, the way that I early on in my first marriage just really made my children my world. And this time it was this other man, and, just got involved in, if he wasn't happy, then I didn't feel happy. So a lot of work had to be done on my part, because if I was expecting my partner to be in recovery and be his best self, then I realized that I needed to do the same. I needed to do that work. So fast forward 2 years after that, his recovery is amazing. Our relationship is something brand new. It's wonderful. We're still, like, he's becoming this new person, and I definitely feel like a different person.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and as far as parenting goes, I feel like I have shown my kids how to overcome these struggles. There were times when they would see me crying and upset, and while I didn't go into the details, I would show them that it's okay for me to be upset, and here's how I'm going to overcome it and work through it. So I definitely think it's made me a better parent as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm excited for you, and congrats, and I'm proud of you. And that's such a story to put a nice bow on, but there's so many hard years, that went into that whole journey that I want to break down. So I have some questions.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. There's so many details.
Yes. Yeah. So many details. So what was your impression of addiction prior to this new relationship? Did you have experience with it? Did you know kind of the ins and outs of the disease?
That's a great question. So alcoholism definitely runs in my family on both sides, not my direct family. So I never had that with my parents or a sibling, but I definitely saw how alcohol was abused in my family at family gatherings and another relative, but not in a day-to-day situation. So, and as far as addiction, like you would hear about it on the radio all the time, what an epidemic that we're in. I'm in Ohio, which is hit really hard by the opioid addiction epidemic, and you hear it, but it doesn't really mean the same thing unless you know somebody who's affected by it.
100%.
Yeah. So that's my experience. It really wasn't personal, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how did you find out he had relapsed? Because I know you said that he was in withdrawal and you kind of didn't know for a while.
Yeah. So there was one night where he told me he was sick, and he called me, and my sleeping was not going well at that time too. And I happened to be up really early in the morning, and he called me and he just said, "I'm really sick and I need help." And so that was before the arrest. I would say like not quite even a month before that. And so then I started, because I'm a fixer and I'm a pleaser. And so I started doing all the research and like, where can you go and all of this. But he had a lot of shame, and he did not want to drop everything and go into treatment. So he was trying to find a way to fix it and still maintain the rest of his life, his job, his apartment, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how I found out.
And did you feel like responsible? Like that you could have like done more or prevented it? Or how did you fit into that dynamic?
It was like surprising and not surprising because I saw how sick he was, but I didn't know what that looked like before. I hadn't had any experience with that. So it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. But at the same time, like, of course, this is what is happening. Like, it was right there in front of me. It was a lot of denial there.
Yes. So hard because, yeah, I've been there. Yeah. So what resources did you find right off the bat?
I was finding treatment facilities nearby, which one of them was where he ended up going, checking himself into. So I'm glad I had found that resource when he needed it, because if any of your listeners have had experience with someone in active addiction, like the problem solving skills are non-existent. He could not figure, like just looking up a number or making a phone call, anything like that was really, really hard for him. And so, I would try and do all this stuff for him, which was not the way to go. But yeah, so that was kind of what I did. I found treatment facilities because that's what I felt like he needed. For myself, I found some online Nar-Anon and Al-Anon meetings, which are for the families. If people aren't sure, families and friends, anyone who knows someone affected by addiction. And so I started doing that and just kind of going in first and seeing what people were saying. And
was it scary?
It was scary. And of course, online is the way to go right now as we record this. But it was surprising more than anything because I went there with the thought that I was going to find resources to help him.
Right.
But when I went in there, they were like, this is all about you and what you need to do and your self-care. And I was like, whoa, what are you talking about?
I'm not the broken one here.
Yes. So it was a total mind shift to go in there and find that out. And now, being someone who goes into those meetings knowing this, but I see people, how do I do this? How do I help my loved one? And, just going back and knowing what that felt like, you feel really powerless and you feel uncertain and unstable. And you just want to help. You want your loved one to be okay. And so you want to do whatever you can, but you find out that it's really not within your control or your power at all. You can't be the one to fix it. Like, they have to be the one to do the work.
It's such a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a risk, but
yeah,
you learn that you really don't have control over anything in life, and you can only do the best that you can and support your loved ones and let them know that you're there for them no matter what. And yeah, taking that risk to tell him that he needed to be in active recovery or we couldn't be in a relationship, like that was such a scary moment because I love him very much. And there was a risk there. He might not have chosen to do that.
Right. Yeah. How did you decide that was the right next step?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because I have a friend who's been my support. She told me early on in our friendship about her daughter's struggles with addiction. And so we happened to be together on the day we both teach yoga, and we were teaching at different times. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can continue this. And she said, hey, here's what I said to my daughter. And that was like the perfect thing. That's exactly what I needed. So, and boundaries, people have to figure out what is going to work best for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that might not be somebody else's boundary, but that was what I needed because I couldn't continue on as it was.
Hey friends, Danielle here. I'm so excited to be able to offer you a way to get the help that you so desperately need, like so many of our guests have. I'm a big fan of therapy. As a mom, it's a must-have. Your mental health has a direct effect on your child's mental health. You can't give them what you don't have, and asking for help is a sign of strength. But it's intimidating. I get it, and you have to find childcare, and with COVID, who can even venture out these days? Well, have you heard of BetterHelp? They're a new sponsor of this podcast, and they are here to help. It's not a crisis line, it's not self-help, it's professional counseling done securely online. BetterHelp will assess your needs through a questionnaire and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. Their counselors are legit. Licensed, trained, experienced, and accredited psychologists, marriage and family therapists, clinical social workers, or licensed professional counselors. And BetterHelp is committed to helping you find a good match, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if needed. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses, plus you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. It's accessible for clients worldwide, and financial aid is available. As a special offer for Failing Motherhood listeners, you get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/wholeheartedly. That's betterhelp.com/wholeheartedly to get the help you need today. Your kids need you whole. Okay, back to the show. And it's so hard to feel like you're still showing love to that person when you do still very much want to be with them and care about them and love them, and putting such a hard boundary, which feels like an ultimatum, feels unloving.
Right.
And dealing with that inner conflict is a really hard place to be unless you have the perspective of someone who has dealt with a similar scenario and can share their story.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is why we need community so much, and why we need to know that we are not the only person in the world that has dealt with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm doing what I do now.
So what did recovery look like for you in those 4 months that he was gone?
I went through the 12 steps and went through each of those, learning that I was powerless over this addiction and what my role in it was. I learned how to, again, be okay on my own. And I added in daily rituals. There are certain things that, as far as my self-care goes, that I think are really important to that situation. I added in like these daily things that I would do every day to add in stability, things that I knew I could count on, things I could control, and focused on my own spirituality and nutrition and movement and finding that community. So those were all my practices of self-care, and ultimately learning that I could be okay no matter what. I might not like whatever situation I'm in. It might feel really bad eventually, but that I could be okay.
Which is so powerful.
Yeah, it really is.
It's everything. It really is. It's like coming to that place of feeling whole and confident in yourself and knowing that you can make the next right decision that's best for yourself and for your kids, because there's a big responsibility and component of you being like the mama bear in that situation, and feeling like you need to put in the boundaries that keep your kids safe and, provide the right example of what you want them to be either exposed to or witness or see. So it's high stakes. There's a lot that puts that weight on your shoulders. How did you feel like you were doing the right thing?
Well, as he worked his recovery and I worked mine, So the trust really started to grow slowly. It was a really slow process because it is a traumatic situation when you see your loved one suffering and you don't know what's going to happen the next day. You don't know if you're going to get that phone call. So I think people have that question of like, are we going to be able to maintain this relationship? How am I going to learn how to trust my partner again? So when you start to feel like you see signs of it. And so, for example, recently he was in school and I was teaching and I was leaving work and I was like, I don't even know if he's in a class right now or if he's, working. And then I was like, oh, wow. There was a time when I knew exactly what time he was supposed to be everywhere because I was constantly just worrying, like, is he there? Is he doing what he's supposed to be doing? And I realized that I didn't even know that anymore. And that was a good sign of trust and
That's
just
big. Yeah.
and to not be, totally trying to control the situation.
Yeah. I know one of the first things that I learned in Al-Anon was whatever you're doing to make yourself feel better or feel more in control is an illusion. So if you're trying to look for and search for bottles to know how much they've drank or not drank, or if you're trying to gauge, their sobriety level, if you're trying to know where they're going and where they're supposed to be there and what's, what gas stations are in between those, like it's not helping, and it's not helping them get better or have any responsibility for their own recovery. And when I started to realize that and actually embrace the freedom of like, it doesn't matter, then I had to deal with that hard reality of like, he could get a DUI. He could drive into a ditch. Like the worst case scenario could very well happen. And whatever I'm doing to think that I'm going to prevent that or control that is not helping. Like that is such a scary reality. But it was a necessary reality for me to understand and cope with, to be able to get to the other side of being okay with it.
Yeah.
Did you feel that same way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly what you said. Just thinking of my own examples, like asking questions, kind of leading questions to try and catch him in a lie or something. Like that's a horrible way to live for both of us. To feel
miserable.
Yeah. And then in his own treatment, I was just hands off. I was completely hands off when he came out of treatment and everything. Like he had to work his way out of the ditch that he had built in work and life. And that sucked to watch him too, like struggle. Mm-hmm. He went for a couple months without hot water, but he knew that he needed to do that. So it wasn't like he was laying any guilt on me because he knew that was part of his recovery to overcome that. And so kind of like sitting by and watching that it was pretty painful, but now like we can look back and say like, he went for 2 months without hot water. Like he would boil his water and now he can laugh about it. And,
wow.
Yeah. So I think that was definitely a major part of it too. Just totally hands off. This is your recovery and I support you, and I'm here to listen when it's hard.
Right.
But I'm not here to fix it anymore. And so that was a really good thing for our relationship.
Yeah, because you can easily get wrapped up in the fear of relapsing again. And like, are you going to meetings and are you buying this or that? Like it was almost worse for me on the back end of treatment than it was leading up to it. Because leading up to it, I was really feeling like I have no control. I am just like surrendering everything. And I felt really secure in that. But then once he was on the other side and we had like gone all in on treatment, then on the other side of it, I was like, oh no, like this could all be snatched away from me again in the blink of an eye. And I almost had to like restart my recovery again.
Definitely. I think when you have a partner in active addiction, you think that recovery, like if I could just get him to treatment, like that will solve everything.
It'll all get better.
And that is when really the real work starts. So
I did not realize that.
I know.
I was like, let's speed this up. Let's get back to like quote unquote normal.
Yeah.
And that did not happen for a long time.
No.
And there really isn't a new normal because you're like two new people.
Yes. It's a whole new thing. And hopefully, if you're both doing your own work, that it's a whole new beautiful thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Much stronger, much more secure, built on the right things, all of that. So if there's a mom that, you know, may be navigating this relationship for the first time and just really feeling like she's not understanding what's going on, not knowing what resources there are, not knowing what her role is in all of it, you know, what is your advice to her?
Definitely find support. So whether that's a friend that you know you can trust and talk to, and whether that's 12-step meetings, find a support so you don't have to navigate it alone, and know that you are not the only one going through this situation, even though it can feel very isolating at times. That is my number one thing. And along with that is self-care. But I think finding that support is number one.
Because the reason why alcoholism is considered a family disease is because it affects everyone in the family and brings down the health and the well-being of everyone involved with that individual that is loving them. And I didn't understand that because I didn't have a family history, you know, connecting any dots for me. So I felt totally blindsided by the whole idea. But thankfully, I was able to kind of see that for myself firsthand and understand, okay, wow, like I am losing my mind, worrying, you know, in anxiety about these things that could and, you know, probably won't happen. And that's what really kind of was the catalyst for me to start my own recovery and take care of myself and see what things I could control and find security and safety in my new routine and rituals. And I did have to get past that idea that I had work to do because I didn't cause this problem. You know, like I felt like I was the innocent bystander in a lot of ways, but thankfully I learned that like that wasn't the case. Like there was still this big word of codependency that I didn't really understand that I came to learn about. But for the beginning, I was really offended by the whole idea. So what have you come to, like, what is your definition of codependency and what does it look like, you know, in its symptoms?
So I would say codependency for me was that idea of I couldn't be happy if the people around me weren't happy. I struggled a long time with being okay when other people are not okay. And I did a lot of therapy work with that.
It's really hard.
And I told you I was going through the yoga teacher training program. Well, that was alongside some of his hardest moments. So I was learning all these beautiful practices and just really excited about the people I was meeting and the things I was learning. But then he was super sick at the time. And I was like, I can't, that's not a good way to be excited while your partner is really down all the time. So for me, it was that idea of not being able to be happy when someone else isn't. And also just the idea of relying on other people and their actions to affect your own happiness too. And feeling that need of, like, we all need support. We need people, we need love. But putting all that pressure on one specific person is really unhealthy.
Yeah. And it does put a burden on them when we have high expectations that are then let down and then become resentments. And so a lot of these big concepts, you know, expectations, resentment, boundaries, codependency, we don't learn them. We're not taught them. It's not like a class in high school we go through and graduate from. It probably should be, though.
Yes.
It would save a lot of strife down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, just with my own family history, you know, my mom loves her children so much, but has really given us everything. And I thought that like when I was like, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to have my own hobbies and do my own things because I just saw how much she relied on us for her friendships and her everything around her. And don't get me wrong, love my mom so much. Like she's amazing. She's been a great support. But I know that that definitely ran in my family too. And I thought that like, oh, I'm going to be my own person. But I totally just like went into some of those patterns without even realizing it. Just
Totally like subconsciously.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if there's moms that aren't necessarily finding themselves in a relationship with someone in recovery or even active, alcoholism, and so they may not resonate with some of those same symptoms, how do you suggest that they just move forward, making sure that they make self-care a priority, almost in like a preventative sense?
Yeah. Gosh, there's so much mom guilt out there. Like whenever you make plans with another mom or do something, it's like that idea of like, oh man, I'm working. I shouldn't be going out right now, or I shouldn't be like doing these classes for myself. There's so much guilt out there. So I think just reminding yourself that self-care is not selfish. It is to recharge your batteries and to be the best mom. When I can just remember like when myself and my kids were separated for a certain amount of time, like coming back together, it was really special. And I can teach my kids now that like, I miss you, but we're always together, even when we're apart. And I think that goes along with codependency, right? Like we can be apart and do separate things, but we will still always be a family and we will always love each other. So yeah, I would definitely just say self-care is not selfish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if they can just take that and run with it in one little routine or ritual, or have just a little bit less guilt about making a mom's night out a priority, or stepping away to go to an exercise class or go to a support group. There's always going to be an element of questioning yourself and second guessing it and thinking, well, how else could I be using this time? Or what could I be doing for my kids? Or what do my kids think about me leaving right now and doing something that has nothing to do with them?
Yeah. When your kid's reaching out and crying to you,
don't go.
Yes. And then you call 10 minutes later and, oh, they're fine. They're fine.
Yes.
They know how to lay on that guilt pretty thick too.
Yes. Remembering not only are they fine, but they will be benefiting from you going and having that growth and, healing yourself in the ways that you can.
Definitely.
So tell us a little bit more about what you do right now.
Yeah, so right now I started, at the end of 2019, I started Rise with Recovery, which is self-care for spouses and partners of those and with the disease of addiction or who are in recovery. We have like a Facebook group where we hang out and just talk about our self-care, talk about each other, answer questions for each other, support one another, and try and give as much self-care online through a blog. And I try and just instill that idea of self-care, like we were just talking, self-care for you is going to benefit your relationship. It's going to benefit your partner if they're doing their recovery. And so far there's been really good response, and people, have said, and it's not meant to replace a 12-step program. I just want to make that clear too. It's meant to, build off of, and, in 12 steps, you hear about a lot about do your self-care. So here are some practices that I can offer to you. I've run some challenges and just some self-care challenges just to bring back attention to people as far as what they can add in simply into their life. And do you want me to share what I'm offering or?
Yeah.
Okay.
How can we connect with you?
Yeah. So you can find, I have a workbook. It's free and it's a week of self-care, and it goes through, there's a daily quote and a daily theme, and then journaling practices, and then gives you kind of some ideas, because self-care is supposed to be personal, right? So I'm not going to say, go take a walk. That might not be your self-care. So it really just gives you ideas of how you want to do your own self-care. And so you can find that at risewithrecovery.com.
Okay.
And I'm on all the social media, Instagram and Facebook, and even dabbling into TikTok these days, which is really crazy.
Look at you. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I will link all of those in the show notes so moms can find you that way. I love what you're doing. I'm cheering you on, and it's much needed. So great that we were able to connect. The last question that I like to ask every guest is, how are you the mom that your kids need?
Yeah, I love this question. I am the mom my kids need because I'm constantly learning, and I'm not trying to fix myself, but I'm constantly trying to grow as a person. And I love the idea of failing as a mother, because we're going to learn how to get back up. We're going to show our kids how to overcome these struggles that we're going to face in life, because even though we want our kids to be safe, they're going to face struggles. And so we can be that example for them. And I really try and show my own kids, without trying to be perfect, how to overcome struggles.
That's amazing. That's going to serve them so well their whole life.
Yeah.
Well, they are so lucky to have you.
Thank you.
And we're so lucky that you're doing the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Danielle.
Okay, so since I interviewed Leslie, she has started an amazing self-care monthly membership called Vitality that you have to check out. So visit risewithrecovery.com for more info. And of course, always remember that you are the mom your kids need. Next episode, we're talking homeschooling with a mom and her teen daughter. Don't forget to grab your gift from me. Go to parentingwholeheartedly.com/emotions to download your PDF guide teaching you how to walk your kids back to calm. Have you left Failing Motherhood a 5-star review yet? It helps other moms find this show. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on.